Daldy. I work here at the Livingston Parish Library. I'm at the Denham Springs-Walker Branch, and we're starting a brand new series. I'm so excited to be teaching painting. We're gonna paint this cardinal today, and I'm going to show you how easy it is if you've ever wanted to try your hand at acrylic painting. I like to assume that everyone has no idea what the word paint means. We start at scratch, and I'm going to show you how to get through it, and you can get as detailed or keep it as simple as you want. And we're going to have a lot of fun. We are going to have a 3-month series and see how it goes after that. So this is going to be in 2 parts. We're going to finish about half of the painting today, and then next week the second video will air to show you how we do the detail work and finish it off. So I'd like to familiarize you with the supplies that you're going to need. Hopefully you'll have some of these already, or you can go out and purchase them before you start painting. I have just the most basic set of acrylic paints here, and sometimes you can get a little kit that has, you know, 8 or 10 or even 5 or 6 colors. I'm going to tell you the ones that you really need: a red, yellow, and a good blue, and a green, and white. I don't use too much black, but I like to have burnt sienna. Raw umber is a good brown. But anything else you can pretty much mix from those colors. So as long as you get a little set that has pretty much close to those colors in it, you're ready to get started. I found a nice set of paintbrushes. It's got a little bit of everything in it: a wide one, a pointed one, a square one, and some little detailed ones. If you get something like this, trust me, once you start using it, you're going to find what you wish you had, and then you can go find them. But I do everything on a budget. So you can find these at your local stores for under $10. Sometimes you can find a set for maybe $3 or $4 to get started with. I like to use a palette knife once in a while, not all the time. This packet came with 6 in it. But sometimes you can find a set of brushes that also has a palette knife in it. So you want to get a palette knife. Something to put your paint on. I have a pad of palette paper that I like to use because you can tear it off and throw it away when you're done. What also works is a plastic plate. If you have a styrofoam plate, you can use that. Also, I have painted, sometimes if you don't want to invest in a set of paints, you can use these little very cheap acrylic paints. The difference is these don't have as much pigment in them, so they're not going to give you as much coverage. But in a pinch, and they're also, you know, I like to use these whenever I want a color that's hard to mix, or something that I want to just, like I have a pink or purple, or look at this green, you know, something like that. If you have a specific color in mind and you can find it for 79 cents, go for it. So, and if you're going to use these, they're thinner. You don't want to use the palette paper. You want to use something like those little cups, those little plastic cups. I don't have one with me, but I'll bring one next time. So I have a set of my old brushes here, that I've been using many years. You want to have 2 cups of water. 1 cup to dip in for your paint, and 1 cup to put your brushes in when you're done with them, because you don't want to use the dirty water too long on your paints, or you might end up getting the paints muddied up. This is an interesting product called Retarder. It slows down the drying time of your acrylic paint. So it's not something you must have right away, but if you find that you get called away and you come back and your paints are all dry, it might be something you want to invest in to help your paints take a little bit longer to dry. It makes them closer to oil paints. That's one big difference between acrylic and oils, is that oil paints dry really slowly. You can go back the next day and go back in and blend a color that you were working on yesterday or even a few days ago with oil paints. Of course, that's a mixed blessing. Sometimes you're ready to paint right up next to something and the paint's still wet. And you know, the hairdryer does not work on oil paints like it does on acrylics. I have a hairdryer over there. If you want to dry an area really quick so you can paint over it, hit the hairdryer on it for a couple seconds, and it helps to dry it even faster. So, the other thing, I have canvas ready to go. You want to keep your clothes clean. It's very important. I have a cover-up that I brought because acrylic dries like plastic. And once it gets on your clothes and dries, it does not come out. So I always I either wear something old to start with, or else I have something that I don't mind getting paint on. This is my nice old comfy shirt that I don't mind sacrificing to be a painting smock. And look what I got for Christmas. I couldn't resist wearing it today. So you wear something that you don't mind getting paint on, or if you do happen to drop a brush on your pants like I did last week, Stop what you're doing, go rinse it out with water and soap. It'll come out while the paint's still wet, okay? Remember that. Now, I'm going to show you how to get started with sketching. Whenever I know I'm going to work from a photograph, I usually like to choose more than one. In this case, I love the colors of that bird, and I like the shape of that one. But I wanted snow and pine needles in the picture, so there's the snow. And here's a painting that I found of a bird with pine needles and snow. But I wanted him facing that way, so I took the components of all these pictures, these photographs, and I blended them together to come up with the painting that I did that we're going to work on today. So that's how I work from a photograph. That's how I get started. And I sketch. To do my sketching, I use pencil colors. If you use a regular pencil, the graphite tends to blend in with the paint whenever it gets wet. And if you're working on a light background, you don't want that gray showing through. So I found that pencil colors work really well. Now, when I sketch in my picture, whenever I start sketching for the painting that I'm going to make, I like to use colored pencils because they don't bleed into the painting. A regular graphite pencil, it tends to break down and bleed into the lighter colors when you're painting. You don't want to gray out your paint that way. So I want my bird to be the central part of my painting. And I'm just going to roughly sketch in the bird so I can paint the sky around it, okay? So actually you could paint the whole sky because the bird is darker. You don't want to paint a light color over a dark color. But the bird is kind of oval shaped right here. He's a little pointy on the back. Let's make him a little bit lower. There's our bird shape, kind of like a teardrop. And his head is up above here, right there. And then his little pointed crown is up there, and we're going to make the neck blend into the rest of him, and then his beak is going to come out here. And his tail comes down about to here. You always want to leave a margin around your detail work because you might put it in a frame. And you may hang it without a frame, but if you definitely want to leave about a ½ inch around because you don't want some pretty tail feather to be covered by a frame. So there's the sketching in that I'm going to do right now, and for now, and we're going to do a little bit of background painting. Okay, so you want to start with 2 cups of water. 1 cup is to put your used brushes in, and the other cup is to actually use to thin the paint down. You want the paint to get down to the smoothest consistency that you can paint with. So, for the background, let me show you my palette first of all. Like I said, I started with very few colors. I used 2 reds. I don't use much black at all, so I put a tiny little bit of black just in case. In this one, I needed black for his face and for his eye, but usually I find a way to darken my colors without black. This is ultramarine blue. This is a nice grass green kind of color. Here's a yellow, like a cadmium yellow. This is crimson, and this is like a cadmium red. Here's my burnt sienna sliding down, and there's my raw umber. Dark brown, reddish brown, red, yellow, green, blue. And then white. I always put a lot of white right in the middle because that's the thing that I use the most. So, in order to paint the background, you get a real good sky color with ultramarine blue and white. And what you want to do is you don't want to mix in that amount of color. You want to take your palette knife. Now, I don't always use a palette knife. I use it whenever I'm mixing a large amount of color. And to cover the whole canvas, I want to make a lot of this. So I take a good bit of white, very tiny bit of blue, not much blue at all. That blue is going to really cause that white to turn a nice sky color. So put a little blue in there, mix it around till I think it's the right color. A little bit more. Okay, that's a little too bright, more white, but I'm going to need a lot of it, so I'm going to put a whole bunch in there. This is the fun part. Use all of our white this time, cover the whole canvas. I'm going to mix it down with a little water, a little more blue. Now, since it's a winter sky, I'm going to put just a hint, just a barest little touch of black in it, so it's kind of a gray, kind of grays the blue down a little bit. All right, so I've got ultramarine blue, a little more blue, white, and just a smidge of black in there to make it grayed out just a little bit. All right, and I've made quite a mound of paint here. Okay, we're going to set that off to the side. Take a nice big wide brush to cover, because you're wanting to cover the whole canvas. Dip it in water. You want to thin this out a little bit by mixing the water in with the thick paint there. And we're going to go up to our bird picture. Doesn't matter if you cover the lines a little bit. And we're going to try painting the whole background in. The branches and the snow and everything is going to go on top of it. When you're painting, now it's different in watercolor, but we're not doing watercolor. So when you're painting in acrylics or oils, you always want to paint the things that are furthest away first, and everything else gets layered on top of it. The closer it is to you, the more likely it's going to get painted last. Okay? You can tell this is a new easel. I didn't have any paint on it yet. I'm breaking it in. So we're going to paint right over the bird lines that we don't want and kind of leave the ones that we do want. Also, dark covers light colors better than light covers dark colors. Like if I tried to paint a white stripe over that red bird, I'd probably have to put 2 or 3 coats on it for it to cover the red. Whereas if I'm painting the red over the blue outline, it'll probably cover it really well because the red is darker than the blue. You might have to add a little more water to get all the coverage that you want to get your sky all along the canvas. These tail feathers there. Now, if you don't have an easel is a nice handy tool to have, but quite often I paint just flat on the table. If I don't have an easel handy, or if I'm painting out somewhere where it's not convenient to set up an easel, you can just paint right there in front of you. You can hold just paint flat down on the painting. The angle, sometimes I pick up the painting and I hold it different ways. If I'm trying to get a line to go a certain direction, I take it off the easel to paint. But you see how I got the outline of the bird? If you don't feel comfortable drawing your bird in, what you can do is you can do a paper cutout of a bird and then trace it onto your painting. Whatever works to get your bird in a good proportion. You want him to be in the center of the painting. You don't want him too close to the edge, but you don't want him too small. You don't want a painting with lots of sky and a little bitty tiny bird in the middle. Now we're going to have some branches come in. But this is a real simple composition. I'm going to get some more white out here. Where did I put my white paint? My white paint. I told you I like to use a lot of paint. And sometimes, just for interest, I'll go back into the sky with some white, and I'll just blend it in, like maybe there's some clouds up there making all that snow, okay? So it kind of makes the painting a little more interesting if you put some other colors in the background. And if I was really feeling adventuresome, I might put a little purple in there too. I'm not going to do that today. We're going to keep this real basic. But we've got all of the blue down. We've got our background in. Got a little bit of white, cloudy, might be clouds. And when you're through with the painting, you probably won't even notice that, except that it unconsciously gives the eye a little relief from nothing but blue. So you have a little bit of a movement in the background with that white. And since he's up on a tree limb, there might be some white around the edges down here too. All right, I'm pretty happy with the sky. The canvas is covered now except for the bird itself. Let me come in a little closer. Now, I do want to get the blue a little closer to the bird back here, because like I said, I can paint red over blue more easily than I can paint blue over red. Now, you want to remember what you used to make that sky color. In case you go outside the lines, or you need to go back and touch up a little bit around the bird, you want to have you want to be able to mix the same shade of blue. If you come back in, and it happens a lot, you have to come in and say, oh, I got a little red over here that doesn't belong, or I want to get in closer to his neck right there or something. And it's nice to have in your memory. Or sometimes if you need to write it down, if it's something that you use several colors to mix up, you want to be able to replicate that whenever you go back and paint around the edges again. All right, so there's our bird. There's our bird. Now I'm going to take a paper towel and wipe some of the paint off and put this one into the cup for brushes, for old brushes. I may go back to it later, but for now I don't want to dirty up all my fresh paint with blue. So now we're ready to, let me hit it with the blow dryer for just a moment here. I want to dry the paint where I'm going to put the bird, because the bird is next. All right, we're going to see if that's enough so that we can start painting around the bird. Now I like, these are two shapes brushes that I like to use. This one is called a filbert. It's rounded on the end. Now if you're doing a really straight edge, you might want a flat brush or even an angled brush to get the lines right. But when you're doing something with round edges, it's nice to have the rounded edge on the brush itself. And the other thing I love to paint with brushes, these are called rounds. They look pointed whenever they're wet, but whenever you're painting with them, they make a nice round point on the end. And you can get into little areas like that. And so I really like painting with rounds. This particular set has some of each of them. So I may dig into this before we're done today. But for now, I'm going to start out with this brush, my little filbert, and I'm going to dip it in some red. Now when I know I'm going to paint something that's going to have highlights and shadows, I like to start out with the mid-range color, a color that's not as bright as the highlights and not as dark as the shadows. And in this case, it's a good cadmium red. Now cadmium is the expensive, that's the expensive stuff, but if you get a good, nice, bright red, and let me tell you, you can buy paints, I've even seen them at the dollar store. Different dollar stores that are really cheap now sell acrylic paints. And so I am going to paint in the shape of my bird. I'm going to worry about going back for details later, but for right now we're going to make a red bird right in the middle of this canvas. Here's his head. I added a little water to thin it out. Comes down. We're not going to do his beak just yet, because the beak is kind of orange, and you could paint the beak in if you wanted to. Get nice red coverage over all of him, and then we're going to go back later. We might get to it today and start painting in some of the details of his feathers. Now I'll tell you about the shape of the cardinal. When they're cold, they fluff their feathers out. So if your bird doesn't seem as sleek or slim, that's okay, because they do get puffy. You'll notice some of the pictures that you've seen, they're all puffed out and they look like little round pin cushions. So you can choose the shape of your cardinal. Doesn't have to be exact like mine. There's that good shape that I was looking for. Now I'm going to, here's an example of, well, I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to get to that in a minute. I want to go ahead and, his wing actually goes up to the back of him a little bit, like so. And then his tail is down below. His tail is a couple of feathers. Now see, I used a round brush to make the round tip ends of his feathers there. And up here I can already see that I'm going to put some more blue in right there where his tail meets his body. But for now, I'm just putting in the red. Also, I went a little further than I meant to with his wingtips there. Now I'm going to use this darker red. I don't know if you can see the darker red, they call that crimson, and I'm going to use that to shape his wing here. Kind of applying a few brush strokes. See, he's got a nice shaped wing there already. There's his shoulder. We're going to come back and do a little shading in a minute. But he actually has quite a bit of dark areas. To be such a red bird, he has a lot of maroon and dark shading on him. All right, so we're going to blends right in with his wing there. And under the bottom of him, it's got a lot of darkness there too. Now I'm going to shade, I'm going to use some blue for the shadows. When you mix blue with this nice maroon, it really darkens it. At some point I'm going to show you all how to use a color wheel and how to make a color wheel so you can use your colors, the way to blend the colors so that you don't feel like you have to dip into black to make something dark. Black, it deadens things. It just saps all the color right out of it. Black is not what you want to use. If you want, like for instance, to make the shading on this red bird, I actually used blue, ultramarine blue. And then if I wanted to, let me get a different brush for this. I'm about through with that big one. If I wanted to highlight the yellow on this bird's chest, robin, it's not a robin, cardinal, I would mix a little yellow with it, see? And that lightens it up, or even white. Now white, you can always throw white in to lighten things up, but don't just assume you can throw black in to make them darker. It's going to take all the color out if you put black in. White around his face. Not pure white, can't be. Put a little red in there. There we go. Now we're fixing to work on his crown up there. And you can do a lot of blending right there on the canvas. Now I want to go back in. Let's see, about through with this. Let me put this brush in the brush cleaning water. I want to go back in with a small brush and put some of that blue right there where his tail comes in, because I didn't quite finish my background. While I still have the blue paint handy, there we go. Better. And also, I want to straighten up this line where I started my tail feathers. Right over it. There we go. Oh, and my little error here, I'm going to cover that up. Didn't mean to go out that far. I was a little overly enthused with the wingtips there. All right, we're going to save most of the fine detail work for next week. What we want to do today, and you're welcome to work on this on your own. That's always fun. But what we're going to do is we're going to get the bird laid in. There's dark feathers going down his tail. In fact, most of his tail is dark. And it's shadowed up underneath. And Let's put a little bit of like bright red right in the middle here. A little bit more darkness out on the wing tips here. Add some more blue since that darkened it in so nicely. Oh, too much blue. A little more blue than I meant. There we go. Now, see, you can always live with it, look at it, and then tomorrow or the next day go back and say, oh, I think I should shadow that in more. I think I put a little too much shadow there. But now let me work on his crest. Now for this, I'm going to turn the canvas around. There's nothing that says you can't. In fact, I'm going to use a smaller brush. I'm going to take that bright red. See, I want it to go up like so. So I'm going to turn it this way because that's my hand. My hand likes to move this way. So that's how I'm going to do the crest. Hey, that looks pretty good. We can always fine-tune it when we start doing details. I just wanted to get the bird pretty much worked into the canvas for today. I want you to be able to sit back and say, hey, look what I did at the end of the day. Even if it's not finished, that bird is coming along. You can tell it's a bird. Now, the beak is not red. The beak is orange. So guess how we make orange? We take a little yellow and a little bit of this orangey red. The crimson has got too much blue in it. So to get a nice orange, we're going to mix yellow and red. And I'm not using the palette knife for this. I'm just using the point of my brush because I don't need very much of it. I just need a little bit. And I'm going to paint that in to the beak right here. Close in here because that little beak is very pointed. In fact, I'm going to change brushes to a smaller brush with a littler point. This beak is slightly curved outward. A little more on the bottom, a little more curve. That looks pretty good. We might make the point go out a little more on top because he uses his sharp pointy beak to break nuts. And we're going to put a little line. It's a little bit lower than center. Okay, lower still. Let me cover that over. Go back with my orange and move that line down a little bit. Kind of erase the line altogether. Alright, well that's something we can work on when we get to the detail work. Be careful when you're putting your hand on your canvas like I did. If you accidentally hit some wet paint and move your hand over a ½ inch, suddenly you have got red in your sky. So be very careful that you don't do that. I've done it before. That's when you need to mix up that blue and cover it. Alright, so we got the beak penciled in, roughed in, and we're going to stop with the red for just a little while. We're going to have so much fun doing the detail work around his face, but right now we just want to get the basics in. So we're going to stop with the bird, and for now we're going to work on the branches. Now in this picture, I really thought I got a little busy with the branches in that one. So in this picture we're going to minimize the branches. We're going to have 3 or 4 down here, and we're going to have 1 going out here, but we're not going to have quite so many branches in this picture. I just think it would work better. So, get all my brushes that I've used over here in the water that I'm not dipping in. Now, this is when I'm going to use the browns that I have created, or that I've squirted, that I've used from the tube. I want you to see, raw umber is a very blackish kind of brown. It's really dark. And then burnt sienna is a very reddish kind of brown. So I kind of used the two of them together to make the branches, and then I added a little white as well. I didn't want it to be, I just wanted a nice generic brown. So you can always, once again, it's just like the bird. I don't want to use my darkest and I don't want to use my lightest. I want to start with a color that's in between the two, and then I can come back with highlights and shadow later. So a little white, maybe a little yellow. That's a lot of yellow, Kathy. All right, got my brown mixed up, the two browns that I laid out. Now, if you have a very limited amount of paint, you can make brown by mixing red and blue and yellow. And it makes a nice brown. You just have to play around with the amounts of each one. So don't put a whole lot. Mix a little tiny bit first and see how you like it. And then remember what you did if you need more. It's kind of a trick learning how much paint to mix whenever you start painting, because you may end up with a whole lot of something that you don't need a whole lot of. Now, for my branches, I'm going to start back here. Now, imagine his feet are going to be right here. As you can see, his little legs are not quite an inch away from the branch. So I'm not going to put the branch right up against him. I'm going to put the branch down here so I'll have room to put his feet in, you see. And I'm going to start out with just a little, I'm going to imply the branch for starters. And then, see, it came out from about here, and then it swooped down. It came in front of his tail, so it's okay to bring it in front of his tail. And then down here, I don't want to put my elbow in my paint. Let me move this out of the way for a minute. The branch came down here, and then some of it came up, some of it came down. Maybe a little piece out here. This one branched maybe. That's about enough of that branch, because like I said, I overdid it last time and I would have had to put a lot of blue paint on it. Now this one, we'll have this going back off to the side here. One way, that way, and that way, and that way. And then maybe, oh yeah, we had one come down here. That was nice. Okay, that's all the branches I'm going to put in. I will fill them out a little bit, but I'm not going to put a whole tree limb like I did in the other one. So I just implied them, but now I'm going to go back and make this branch bigger. Remember, branches get smaller as they go out. So the biggest branch will be the one that starts the whole thing. And then as you go out from that one, each branch gets a little more slender. And then when it gets out near the ends, they're going to have a lot of greenery on top of them. So we're just kind of implying where the branches belong at this point. They don't have to be real perfect, because there's going to be a lot of branches, a lot of the pine needles. Oh, you're going to have fun painting the pine needles when it gets time to do the pine needles. It's a little bit thicker here, but consistent as we go further out from the branch. We get thinner and thinner. Oh, and I did one down here. I almost forgot. I think that's enough. We'll go back and detail the branches after we decide where we're going to put pine needles. It wouldn't really make any sense. It wouldn't do any good to detail all those branches in right now when we're going to cover most of them with pine needles. Just want to indicate where they're going to be. Okay, that's the branch. And I tell you what, we'll put his little legs in. We won't do all the fine-tuned detail, but I can tell you, I intentionally made his legs a different color than the branch, so it wouldn't look like twigs of the branch. So I take a very tiny brush, one of my smaller ones, and I just take a different shade of brown. Now in this case, I'm going to take my burnt sienna and mix a little yellow with it. I think I used yellow ochre when I was making his legs, but we'll worry about that next time. For now, I'm just gonna pencil them in. And the legs, they actually go up into his feathers. So you have to think about where the weight of the bird is. The legs are actually a little further back than you would expect them to be. And they come down a little bit, and then they go forward. And then they make little feet. I made that a little thicker than I should have, which is a good thing that I still have my light blue brush and my light blue paint. And I can go back in and make this leg a little thinner there. Probably better if I let that brown dry a little bit, but we don't want his leg quite that thick. But that's not a bad length. And then we're going to do the other one. And we're almost done for today. We're going to pause here in a minute and let you live with it for a week, and then next week we're going to come back and fine-tune and put some detail work in. All right, we're working on his legs here, but we're not going to worry too much about it. Next week when we do the detail work, we will come in and put the shadows and the highlights on his legs. Right now, that leg is kind of fat. As long as it's coming in at the right angle, we can work on the proportions of it. It shows a little bit under the branch. And once again, I'm going to take my blue. I made it a little too fat, so I'm going to take that blue that I still have mixed up and thin his leg down a little bit. All right, we're almost done for today. I might have to, like I said, we're going to work on details next week. Now we're going to, I'll tell you what, we've got just a few more minutes here. I'm going to go ahead and put some greenery on just so you can see how much fun that is. I use a tiny little fine brush for that. And I just make lots and lots. I use a couple of shades of green, which we'll mix that up next week, but for now I'm just going to show you how it's going to look with some needles on the leaves. I've dumbed it down a little. I've made you're going to have some bright green, but mainly we're going to have some pine green, some darker green, which I mixed blue and a little bit of yellow in with the green to darken it up a little bit. And you start, when you're making the pine needles, you start on the branch and you just make a quick movement outward. And you do them in all different directions. We're going to worry about the snow. After your needles look perfect and you don't want to do anything else to it, that's when we're going to come back and cover them with snow. And they go out in all directions. If you think about how a pine tree looks, the needles go out every which way. You don't want to make them too thick. And you want to make them a consistent length. Like on the branch there, all of those are about between a ½ inch and an inch long, depending on what kind of pine tree you have. And you can play with that on your own if you want to go ahead and put your pine needles in. You're welcome to do that. I'm not going to do the whole thing on this one, but I just wanted to get you started in case you wanted to keep painting. And feel free to branch out on your own. Paint some more if you're feeling into it and you want to try it out. See how far you can get. And then next week, like I said, I'm going to come back in and we're going to do the detail work. We're going to do a little more fine tuning on his face and his legs and his feathers. We're going to put more highlights in and low lights, and we'll add some more greenery, work on his legs. You see how this brown didn't cover the red? That red is a very bright color, so we're going to have to do a little bit more right there to make sure that it looks like the tree branch is in front of his tail. See, his tail is behind the branch, so we're going to go over that some more, and we're going to put some more pine needles in and work on details. We're going to finish it next week, but I think you probably got to a real good place today. We're going to call this our stopping point for now. And I just hope that you enjoyed yourself. I hope you got a lot out of this, and feel free to paint and have a lot of fun with it. So remember to stay safe and stay happy and keep reading and keep painting.